In 1943, on a train traveling from Chicago to New York, the tears of an 8-year-old child traveling alone caught the attention of the man who would change his life forever. But why was this child embarking on this long journey alone, and who was the mysterious man he met on that train? If you have a similar story, please send it to the email address in the description.
I am Tommy Richardson. I am 89 years old now, but I never forget my 8-year-old self from that day. On a cold December morning in 1943, I stood alone at Chicago Union Station. All the adults around me were passing by with hurried steps. Everyone had somewhere to go. Everyone had a family. But I stood there with only a small suitcase in my hand and a train ticket to New York given to me by the orphanage director in my pocket. My father, Frank Richardson, had enlisted in the United States Navy after the Pearl Harbor attack in 1942. While he was fighting in the Pacific, my mother, Mary, had also started working at a munitions factory in Chicago. She was one of the female workers known as Rosie the Riveter at that time. With her red headscarf, blue overalls, and hammer in hand. She was the hardest working employee at the factory. She always tied her long brown hair in a tight bun, and her green eyes were always full of hope. "Tommy, your father will be proud when he comes back," she always said. But that winter day, my mother and 12 of her friends lost their lives in a fire that broke out at the factory. News came that my father was in the Pacific War, so I was being transferred from St. Mary's Orphanage in Chicago to St. Joseph's Orphanage in New York, because the orphanage in Chicago was closing, and children like us were being distributed to other cities. The train was Pennsylvania Railroad's famous Broadway Limited train. The cars were dark green, the interior had red velvet seats, and was decorated with shiny brass details. White lace curtains swayed at the windows. As the train left Chicago, it left the city's smoke behind and headed toward the snowy rural areas. We were passing through the frozen fields of Illinois and the small towns of Indiana. An elderly lady sitting next to me asked, "Child, where are you going?" I replied, "To New York." "To the orphanage." The woman shook her head with a sad expression and no longer spoke to me. At that moment, I felt like the loneliest child in the world. Hours passed on the train. We were crossing from the Ohio borders into Pennsylvania. It was snowing outside, and the window panes were fogging up. I was hungry and cold. I only had $2 of allowance in my pocket, but the orphanage director had said, "Do not spend it unnecessarily." I wanted to go to the dining car, but I did not have the courage. Just then, an elderly man from the other end of the car walked toward me. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a slightly limping walk. His hair was white as snow, his face was full of wrinkles, but his blue eyes were very warm. He wore a dark gray suit and had a small United States flag pin on his left lapel. He slowly came with his cane in hand and sat across from me. "Hello, son," he said in a soft voice. "I am Harold Mitchell. You look very sad. What is wrong?" I told him my story. I told him that my father was at war, that my mother had died in the factory fire, and that I was going to the orphanage in New York. Harold, uncle, because I started addressing him that way from that moment, listened, and I saw his eyes watering. "You know, Tommy," he said, "I also grew up as an orphan like you. I was born in 1895. My father also died in war, in the Spanish-American War. My mother also died of typhus. I grew up in an orphanage in Boston." Harold Uncle's story was very similar to mine. He told me how he survived in the orphanage, how he went to school, how he acquired a profession. "I am 70 years old now," he said. "I live in a small Down in Pennsylvania. My wife Dorothy died last year. We never had children, but you remind me of my own grandson. Then he took out a sandwich from his pocket. One of the last sandwiches Dorothy made, he said. But I am old now. I have no appetite. You eat this. The sandwich was ham and cheese between fresh bread. It was the most delicious sandwich I had ever eaten. We went to the dining car together. Harold's uncle ordered hot soup, steak, and French fries for me. Growing children need to eat well, he said. I thanked him but said, I have no money. Do not worry, this is my gift, he said with a smile. The train's restaurant car was very elegant. White tablecloths, silver cutlery, crystal glasses. The waiters were in white jackets, very polite. We were watching the snowy mountains of Pennsylvania from the window. Harold's uncle told me war stories. He had fought in France during World War I. I was wounded in the Battle of Verdun, he said, pointing to his left leg. That is why I limp. War is a very terrible thing, Tommy, he said. But sometimes people have to fight for their homeland. Your father is also fighting for our freedom right now. You should be proud of him. The rhythm of the train was making me sleepy. Harold's uncle took off his jacket and put it over my shoulders. Sleep a little, son, he said. We still have a way to go to New York. When I woke up, the train was approaching New York. Skyscrapers were beginning to appear. I could see the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building. Harold's uncle was giving me information. About the city. New York is the most beautiful city in the world, he said. People from every nation live here. They are all chasing the American dream. When we arrived at Penn Station, Harold's uncle got off with me. Let me take you to the orphanage. He said St. Joseph's Orphanage was in a small building in the north of Manhattan. On the Bronx border, red brick buildings, narrow streets, snow everywhere. The orphanage director, Sister Margaret, met us at the door. She was tall in a black dress. A very serious woman. Tommy Richardson, she said, you are coming from Chicago. Harold's uncle told her my story. Sister Margaret's face softened. Do not worry, child, she said. We will take good care of you here. Before Harold's uncle left, he gave me an envelope. Open this later, he said. And remember, you are not alone. There are people in this world who value you. He hugged me tightly. I always remember his warmth, his Old Spice cologne scent. When I opened the envelope, there was $50 inside and a note. Dear Tommy, this money is for your education. Finish school. Be a good man. I have one request from you. When you grow up, help another child too. With love, Uncle Harold Mitchell. Below was his address, Harold Mitchell, 425 Elm Street, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The years I spent at the orphanage were not easy. The first nights at St. Joseph's Orphanage were the hardest. There were 6 beds in the room. The walls were cold and bare. The other children had also lost their families like me. Some cried at night, while others never spoke at all. I was also among them, thinking about where I hid the money Harold's uncle had given me. Sister Margaret woke us up at 6 every morning. We washed in cold water and put on our thick gray uniforms. Breakfast was usually oatmeal and watered-down milk. But I did not forget Harold's uncle's words. Education is your most important weapon, he had said. I went to school and worked very hard. I was very good at mathematics and science. My teacher, Miss Johnson, said, Tommy, you are a very smart child. You can go to university. During my high school years, I studied in the orphanage library every evening. The books were old and worn, but they were full of knowledge, trigonometry, physics. Chemistry, I learned them all. While other children played games, I memorized formulas and solved problems, because I knew that education was my ticket out of this orphanage. In 1951, I graduated from high school as valedictorian. I received a full scholarship from Columbia University. I entered the engineering faculty. The campus in Morningside Heights, in the heart of New York, was magnificent. Red brick buildings, green lawns, young people hungry for knowledge everywhere. My first year at university was very difficult. Other students came from wealthy families. But I was an orphanage child. My clothes were old. I had no money in my pocket. But thanks to the $50 Harold uncle had given me, I had bought my books. I stayed in the dormitory and earned my allowance by working in the cafeteria. In 1953, I graduated from civil engineering. I was alone at the graduation ceremony. Other students had their families with them, but I only carried Harold uncle's photograph with me. I sent him my graduation photo. I am proud of you. Tommy, he replied. Dorothy would be proud of you, too. During those years, I wrote letters to Harold uncle. He also replied to me. He gave me life advice. Life sometimes knocks you down, Tommy, but the important thing is to get up and continue. He wrote in one. In 1955, I got married. My wife Susan was a teacher. I had met her at a library in Manhattan. She had long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a very warm smile. At first sight, I had told her Harold uncle's story. How touching, she had said. That man became your life angel. Our wedding was small but meaningful. We got married at St. Patrick's Cathedral. Our guest count was low, but our hearts were full of love. We spent our honeymoon at Niagara Falls. Susan's family loved me very much. My father-in-law William said, Tommy, you are a very good young man. I am proud of my daughter. In 1957, my son Robert was born. When I first held him, I was trembling. This little baby was my son. My lineage was continuing. I sent his photo to Harold uncle. He looks just like you. He replied, try to be a good father to him. You know how to be a father because you learned from good people. In 1960, my daughter Jennifer was born. Blonde hair, blue eyes, exactly like her mother. Now I had a complete family. We bought a small but warm house in the Bronx. It had a garden. Susan planted flowers. In the evenings, I played games with the children and read them fairy tales. My engineering career was also progressing. I was working on major construction projects in New York. I was building bridges, skyscrapers, hospitals. Every time I completed a project, I wrote a letter to Harold uncle. I am proud of you, son, he always said. In 1965, no letter came from Harold uncle. I called Harrisburg. His neighbor said Harold died last month from cancer. In his last days, he always talked about you. I went to his funeral. A small church, few people. But I was there. I put a wreath on his grave. To dear Uncle Harold, thank you for changing my life, Tommy. Years passed. I also retired. But I did not forget Harold uncle's words. When you grow up, help another child too. In 2005, Susan got cancer. Those months we spent in the hospital were very difficult. Holding her hand, I said, do not worry. You became my greatest treasure. I lost her in 2007. At her funeral, I experienced that deep loneliness I had felt at Harold uncle's grave again. But I was not left alone. My children, my grandchildren were with me. Robert had become an engineer. Jennifer had become a doctor. Both knew my story. Dad, you always told us about Harold uncle. Robert said, "Now it is your turn to help other children." In 2010, I started volunteering at an orphanage in New York, the same St. Joseph's Orphanage. The buildings had been renovated, but the loneliness in the children's eyes was the same. There I met a 9-year-old child named Michael. He was also a child whose father had died in Afghanistan and whose mother had died in a traffic accident, just like me. When I first met Michael, I saw him sitting alone in the cafeteria. He had brown hair, green eyes, and a very sad expression. I sat next to him. "Hello," I said. "I am Uncle Tommy. You look very sad," just like Harold Uncle had said to me. Michael told me his story. His father, Patrick, was a sergeant in the United States Army. He died in a bombing attack in Kandahar. His mother, Laura, was a nurse. She lost her life in a traffic accident. While going to the hospital, Michael's grandmother tried to raise him, but she also died of a heart attack. I did for Michael what Harold Uncle had done for me. I supported him, covered his education expenses. Now Michael is 22 years old, a university graduate, an engineer. And he is also helping other children. Harold Uncle's chain of kindness continues. The day we met on that train changed both our lives. He did not just give me money or food. He gave me hope. He gave me love. He showed me that I was not alone in life.
That is why I always say, even the smallest gesture of kindness in life can change someone's life forever. Harold Uncle could have ignored that little child on the train that day, but he did not ignore him, and this turned into a chain of kindness that lasted for generations. Maybe you have encountered such a Harold Uncle in your life, or maybe you have become a Harold Uncle for someone. We will continue to share these stories because they should not be forgotten.